Silver bit deeper every time Genevieve stumbled, and Corvus made sure she stumbled often. The courtyard stones of Dark Hollow Keep had been scrubbed for ceremony, washed clean in ash water until they shone black as wet bone. Banners snapped above the crowd, her pack's moon and fang crest beside the enemy's silver wolf, stitched together like a threat pretending to be peace. Two guards hauled her by the chain between her wrists, forcing her into a slow circle around the central pyre while elders, hunters, and den mothers watched from the steps. Watched and did nothing. Her cuffs were forged with powdered silver worked into the iron. Every jolt sent fire up her arms, bright and nauseating. The skin around her wrists had split hours ago. Blood and burn sweat slicked her palms. Her wolf, usually a steady pulse beneath her skin, had curled away from the poison and left her feeling hollowed out. A child in the second row pointed. "Why is she kneeling?" "I'm not kneeling," Genevieve said through her teeth, and tried to straighten. A guard yanked the chain, and she hit stone hard enough to crack her lip. Laughter flared from the outer ring. Someone spat near her shoulder. From the dais, Corvus Bloodmoon lifted both hands, requesting silence with the smooth authority he had grown into far too quickly. Moonlight painted his profile in hard silver, picking out the sharp family resemblance they shared. The same dark hair, the same high cheekbones inherited from their grandmother. Except where Genevieve had her mother's eyes, Corvus had ambition distilled into ice. "Pack of Dark Hollow," he called, voice carrying over the courtyard. "Tonight we end 10 years of blood waste at our border. Tonight we honor the treaty." Honor. She tasted copper and laughed once, brokenly. The treaty parchment lay on an obsidian table between two braziers, seals pressed in red wax, witness signatures, names of the dead written along the margin like decoration, and below all of it, the blood clause. One highborn Dark Hollow female surrendered to Silvermane custody as guarantee. Her. Corvus dipped a dagger into a ceremonial bowl and drew the blade over his palm. Blood pattered on the parchment. "As acting regent, I bind this in my name." He turned toward her then, and his smile was almost affectionate. That made it worse. "Bring forward the tribute." The guards dragged her to the base of the dais. Genevieve planted her knees and refused the final tug, forcing them to strain against her weight, while the entire pack watched. Her aunt looked away. Her old training captain kept his gaze fixed on the banners as if she were already a ghost. "Say it," Corvus murmured, too low for anyone else. "Say you accept." She looked up at him, breath ragged. "You're not ending a war. You're feeding it." His expression didn't flicker. "You were always dramatic." Then he raised his voice, pitching it for the crowd. "Let all present witness. This tribute is lawful and necessary. Genevieve Darkhollow is—" He paused just long enough to enjoy it. "Expendable." The word landed heavier than the chain. Murmurs rippled. A few wolves laughed openly now, relieved to have permission. Expendable. Not daughter of this house, not blood of the line, not soldier who had held the North Trench at 17 while Corvus hid behind elders and maps. Expendable. Genevieve's throat tightened until breathing hurt. "You swore on Uncle Theron's grave you'd protect me." "I swore to protect the pack," Corvus said. "And you stopped being the pack the moment you became inconvenient." He pressed his bloody thumb to the treaty seal. The wax hissed. A horn sounded from the western wall. Midnight watch. First call. Formal handover in 1 hour. They threw her in the old salt cell beneath the courtyard, while nobles drank to peace above her head. Brine stung the burns at her wrists. Someone had left the drain open. Winter air slid through the floor grate, carrying smoke, roast meat, and distant laughter down into the dark. Her laughter had once sounded like that. She barely remembered it. When the bolt scraped open again, she braced for more guards. Corvus stepped inside alone, boots untouched by mud, cloak clasped with the blood moon crest. He crouched in front of her, not quite close enough to touch. I came to offer you a mercy. Genevieve leaned against the wall and said nothing. If you walk quietly at the boundary stones, he continued, I'll make sure your death is quick when Silvermane tires of you. So that's the plan? Tribute, then execution? Don't be naive. His smile sharpened. You'll live long enough to matter. Long enough to keep Lucian Silvermane obedient while I consolidate power. Raids will continue, blame will shift. Emergency rule remains mine. Everybody wins. Everybody but the people dying. People die. Thrones don't wait. She surged forward before she thought, chain clanking, and would have clawed his eyes if Silver hadn't burned her muscles weak. Corvus caught her jaw in one hand and squeezed until pain flashed white. Listen carefully, he said softly. At moonrise tomorrow, I'll announce a second concession. Your birth den's children sent as foster collateral. If you do anything inconvenient tonight, I start with them. I have their names. Ice flooded her chest. You wouldn't. He released her face with a little shove. You still think cruelty requires permission? When he stood, he dropped something in her lap, a scrap of parchment sealed in family wax. Her own Denmark. A warning. He tapped the seal with one finger. Remember what obedience buys. The door slammed. Bolt shot home. For a long minute she sat frozen, staring at that wax stamp while her pulse battered her ears. Then she broke the seal with shaking fingers. 3 names. Her little brother's. Her sister's daughter. At the bottom, in Corvus's hand, run, and I got them first. Something inside her finally gave way. Not snapped, not shattered, but shifted, like a lock turning. She wasn't deciding between obedience and rebellion anymore. She was deciding where the killing started. When the next guards came, drunk on victory and honey liquor, she kept her head bowed and let them haul her up the stairwell. Their torches smoked. The corridor reeked of old tallow and wet wool. Above, bells rang midnight proper. Time for transfer. At the outer gate, sleet needled her face. The border road cut through dead pines toward the boundary stones, where both packs would exchange formal oaths under moonlight. Corvus waited mounted, flanked by spear wolves in ceremonial mail. He didn't look at her as he gave the order. Move. They marched her between 6 guards, chain hooked to a lead ring on the saddle in front. Every step jarred the burns, her bare feet numbed on frozen mud. Halfway down the road, one guard behind her grabbed a fistful of her hair and hissed, Smile for your new king, tribute. Another laughed. If they reject her, can we keep what's left? Genevieve stopped walking. The lead rider cursed and jerked the chain. She didn't move. Pain screamed up her arms, bright enough to make her vision tunnel. In that narrowing dark, she saw not the road, but the 3 names on parchment. Children sleeping, trusting walls that would not hold. If she arrived at those stones as Corvus's offering, she was leverage. If she vanished before the handover, she became a problem neither pack controlled. Problem was better than hostage. She twisted suddenly, dropping her weight. The chain went slack for one heartbeat as the lead rider's horse sidestepped. She drove both cuffed hands backward into the kneecap of the guard behind her. Bone cracked. He howled and collapsed, taking 2 others down in the mud. She ran. Shouts exploded behind her, bolts of command. After her! No shifting, idiot! The silver, she'll drop! Maybe she should have dropped. Silver poison made each breath scrape. Branches lashed her cheeks as she veered off the road into pine shadow, following the low roar of the border creek. If she could reach the stones first in chaos, maybe she could force witnesses. Maybe she could scream the truth loud enough that somebody listened. Boots pounded behind. An arrow hissed past her ear and buried in a tree. Another clipped her shoulder, spinning her sideways. Hot blood soaked her sleeve. She slid down an embankment into icy water, shock cutting through the silver haze. The creek surged around her thighs, black and fast. Upstream, she could see the standing stones like broken teeth against the sky, old moon sigils faintly visible where lichen hadn't swallowed them. Beyond that line lay Silvermane territory. Forbidden. Alive. Genevieve waded, stumbled, climbed the opposite bank on raw hands, and nearly went to her knees when the first wave hit. Not pain, pull. A violent, impossible tug beneath her ribs, as if a hooked wire had caught her sternum and drawn tight toward the stones. Her wolf surged awake so abruptly she gasped. The world sharpened. Frost in the air, cedar smoke, iron-rich blood. A heartbeat that was not hers thudded in exact counterpoint to her own. No, 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 that couldn't be. Torches flared ahead. Two lines of warriors emerged from opposite sides of the clearing. Dark Hollow escort on one side, silver-cloaked soldiers on the other, blades bare in ritual caution. At their center, the boundary line cut through old snow like a pale scar, and across it, striding through sleet as if weather feared him, came Lucien Silvermane. The Alpha King wore no crown, only a black coat over scarred leather and a sword across his back. Moonlight caught on old damage, one pale line over his brow, another crescent scar carved at his throat. He moved like something built for war and too tired of it to pretend otherwise. Corvus rode into the clearing seconds later, soaked and furious. "Seize her!" he barked. Genevieve staggered to the nearest stone and clutched it to stay upright. The pull in her chest became a burn, then a hum, then certainty so total it made her dizzy. She looked at Lucien and felt her pulse lock to his from 20 paces away. Words tore out of her before pride could stop them. "The bond." She gulped air, shaking. "I can feel the bond." Silence, then laughter from both sides, harsh, disbelieving, relieved. A Dark Hollow captain barked, "Hear that? Tribute thinks she can bargain with mating tales." One of the Silvermane elders snorted. "Convenient." Corvus's smile returned, thin as a knife. "Desperation makes poets of cowards." Genevieve swayed, humiliated heat climbing her neck even through the cold. Maybe silver and blood loss had finally cracked her mind. Maybe this was the last trick of a cornered wolf. Lucien stopped dead, his face drained. One gloved hand flew to the crescent scar at his throat as if struck there. His breath punched out of him. For a heartbeat he looked almost frightened. Then he stepped over the forbidden line. Every weapon in the clearing snapped up. "Your Majesty," someone shouted. Lucien ignored them. His gaze never left Genevieve. The sleet hissed against his shoulders. He took one more step, then another. Coming close enough she could see gold flecks in his irises and the tiny tremor in his jaw like he was holding himself together by force. When he spoke, her name was roughened to a prayer and a claim at once. Genevieve. The thread between them went incandescent. He dropped to one knee in Dark Hollow mud, bowed his head, and bared his throat to her in instinctive submission. "Mine," he said. No one laughed after that. No one laughed after that. The clearing held its breath. Sleet hissed on drawn steel. Dark Hollow spears lifted. Silvermane blades answered. Corvus's horse sidestepped, nostrils flaring, while his rider swore and yanked it hard. Across from him, Lucien remained on one knee in enemy mud, head bowed, throat bared, as if every law carved into the boundary stones meant less than the thread pulling between him and the woman in chains. Genevieve couldn't move. Warmth flooded her in pulses that had nothing to do with blood loss and nothing to do with weather. It started where the silver bit her wrists, then leapt up her arms like sparks racing dry tinder. Her skin felt too tight for her body. Her wolf, half poisoned and huddled in pain only minutes ago, surged forward with a low, hungry whine that echoed in the back of her teeth. "Mine," the wolf said. "Impossible," her mind answered, panicked. Enemy! Alpha King! Trap! Lucian lifted his head. His eyes flashed, human gray burning through to molten gold so bright it looked like banked coals struck by wind. He took a sharp breath, like the scent of her had hit his lungs and cut all the way down. She felt that breath in her own chest, exactly timed, as though her ribs had become an instrument tuned to him. Corvus found his voice first. Get up! He snapped at her, then at Lucian. This theater ends now. The tribute is Dark Hollow property until terms are completed. Lucian rose slowly, never taking his gaze off Genevieve. You signed terms for a hostage, he said, voice rough with something like restrained violence. Not for my mate. Murmurs shuddered through both ranks. One Dark Hollow elder spat into the snow. Mate claims can be faked. Lucian turned his head a fraction, and several Silvermane warriors visibly stepped back from their own king. Then come close, he said softly. Tell me this is fake while she bleeds silver in front of me. The bond yanked harder, painful now. Genevieve braced a palm against the nearest standing stone and felt old moon sigils hum under her skin. Lucian's scent, frost, cedar, and blood iron, cut through sleet and smoke with dizzying force. Desire hit her so suddenly she hated herself for it. Fear rose right behind it. She had been raised on stories of Silvermane brutality, on warnings that Lucian was a wolf carved out of war. Yet every instinct in her body screamed not danger now but rightness so deep it felt ancestral. He took one deliberate step toward her. Dark Hollow archers drew, Silvermane's sword snapped up. Genevieve heard Corvus bark. Loose if he touches her? Lucian stopped just outside arm's reach. He did not look at the archers. He did not look at Corvus. He looked only at her split lip, her shaking hands, the silver cuffs fused with blood at her wrists. Genevieve, he said, lower now, meant only for her. Look at me. She did. The world narrowed to that single line between their eyes, the roar of creek water, creak of bowstrings, harsh breath of mounted guards, everything blurred. In the lock of his gaze, she felt the thread go taut and singing, electricity under skin, heat at the nape of her neck, a matching ache at the crescent scar on his throat. Her pulse aligned to his with terrifying precision. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. He swallowed. She watched his throat work, watched the old scar there blanch. I can feel you, he said. Her laugh came out wrecked. That makes 2 of us. His mouth almost softened. Did he force this? Lucian asked, barely audible. Did anyone force you to speak the claim? No. The truth cracked out before she could strategize it. I said it because it hurt not to. Something savage and relieved moved across his face. Corvus leaned from the saddle. Enough, he said. By treaty law, she transfers at dawn under restraint. You'll receive your... By moon law, Lucian cut in, voice now carrying to every edge of the clearing. A recognized mate cannot be traded as tribute. Attempting to do so is a blood crime against both packs. He finally turned to Corvus. Release her. Corvus smiled thinly. Or? Lucian's gold eyes did not blink. Or I carry her out over your dead. The standoff snapped like ice. Bows strained. Someone's wolf growled in full shift on the tree line. Genevieve felt the first edge of panic. Not for herself, but for what would happen if battle broke here with her brother's name still inked in Corvus's hand. She forced air into her lungs. Corvus, she said loudly, cutting through the rising noise. You called me expendable. Prove it. His attention flicked to her, wary. If I'm worthless, she said, every word burning, then release the chain and stop pretending this is sacrifice. A long beat. Corvus measured the field. Too many witnesses. Too much uncertainty. Lucian already over the line and ready to kill. He could not win cleanly tonight. His lip curled. Fine, he said. Take her. Let the Mad King keep his stray. He jerked 2 fingers at the nearest guard. The man approached Genevieve, hands trembling, and fumbled the lead hook loose from the horse ring. The silver cuff stayed locked. Corvus wheeled his mount before anyone could read his expression fully. As he passed her, he leaned down just enough for only her to hear. You think this saves them? He whispered. You just move the board. Then he spurred away into the sleet. Dark Hollow forces withdrew in ragged order, throwing glances back like knives. Silvermane held formation until the last torch vanished into pines. Only then did Genevieve sway. Lucian moved instantly, then checked himself half a step short. His hands hovered, open, empty. May I touch you? The question hit harder than the bond. She stared at him, dizzy. You're asking? Yes. Why? Because you have been handled enough for one night. Her throat tightened. She gave a single brittle nod. He slid one arm behind her back and the other under her elbows, careful of the shackles, and the contact was a live current. Heat meeting heat, wolves pressing against skin from the inside. Genevieve bit down on a sound that wanted to be either a sob or a moan and couldn't decide which. Lucian looked toward his captain. Prepare the East Keep. No cells, no chains. A gray-bearded elder bristled. Your Majesty. Lucian didn't raise his voice. No chains. The elder shut his mouth. Silvermane Keep rose out of black rock and fur like a cliff taught to breathe. Torches burned blue-white along its walls, throwing snowlight across carved wolf-head gutters and narrow windows. Genevieve expected a dungeon. She expected ceremony, interrogation, perhaps a mating claim enforced before dawn in the name of politics. Instead, Lucian took her to a private chamber with a fire already lit, dismissed everyone, including the healer, and shut the door himself. He set a brass basin on the table, steam curling from the water. Moonroot and clean linen lay beside it. He stripped off his outer gloves, then pulled on a fresh pair of thick black leather before kneeling in front of her chair. Kneeling. Again. Genevieve, still in torn clothing and blood-stiffened hair, gripped the armrests like she might float away if she let go. What are you doing? Removing the cuffs, he said. If I use bare skin and slip, the silver transfers and burns you worse. He lifted a small key taken from the Dark Hollow guard at the border. May I? Her laugh was jagged. If this is a trick, it's elaborate. It isn't. She held out her wrists. Even with care, the first cuff came free like peeling metal from raw meat. She hissed through her teeth. Lucian froze instantly, eyes flicking up. Do you need a pause? She blinked at him. You're asking that too? Yes. Keep going. He did. Slow and precise, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jump when Silver tore skin. When the second shackle fell to the floor with a heavy ring, her arms felt suddenly weightless and unbearably exposed. Lucian did not reach to claim her, did not crowd her space. He dipped a cloth in warm water and held it up. This will sting. She nodded. He cleaned the wounds as if tending sacred text. Small movements, no wasted touch. Heat seeped into her swollen skin. Moonroot paste cooled the burn after, thick and fragrant. He asked before each bandage wrap, before turning her hand, before lifting her chin to check where she'd struck stone. At one point, when she flinched from a shadow at the door, he said quietly, "No one enters without your leave." Genevieve studied him over the rim of exhaustion. You could use this, she said. The bond. My position. You could make me swear anything tonight. His eyes went very still. I know. Why not? Lucian set the cloth down. Because if I take what isn't freely given, then Corvus was right about what power is. A beat. And because the bond is not a leash, it is choice, or it is rot. Something painful and unfamiliar pressed behind her ribs. He finished wrapping her right wrist and sat back on his heels. "You can lock this chamber from inside," he said. "I'll station guards beyond the stair. If you want none at the door, say so." "You think I won't run?" "I think you might," he said honestly. "If you do, I'd rather it be through a gate than a window." Despite herself, a rough breath that might once have been a laugh escaped her. That was almost humor. "Don't spread it around." He rose, collected the bloodied silver cuffs with tongs, and carried them to the hearth to be sealed in a lead box. Only then did he pause at the threshold. "Sleep if you can," he said. "I haven't slept properly in weeks." His hand rested on the door frame. "Then listen for my voice." She frowned. "What?" "If nightmares come," he said, "I'll be outside." He left before she could answer. Night did what night always did. It waited until she closed her eyes. In the dream, Corvus stood over a row of kneeling children, bone dagger bright in moonlight. 3 names were carved into their foreheads in her own handwriting. When she tried to scream, silver poured from her mouth like molten wire. Genevieve jerked awake with a strangled sound, halfway shifted, nails lengthened, canines sharp, breath tearing in and out too fast. The room was dark except for banked coals. For one blind second she didn't know where she was. Then she heard it. A low male voice beyond the door, steady as heartbeat. "And east of Hunter's Gate is the Winter Crown," Lucian was saying, calm, unhurried, as if continuing a conversation they'd started years ago. "7 stars. In hard storms you follow the lowest point, not the brightest. Bright lies in snow." She sat up, shaking. He kept speaking without opening the door. "There's a broken constellation above the southern ridge. Silvermane calls it the Split Fang. Dark Hollow maps call it the River Wolf. Same stars, different stories." Genevieve pressed both palms to her eyes until sparks burst behind them. "You're really out there." "Yes." "You could come in." "I could," he said. "Do you want me to?" She hesitated, then swallowed. "No." "Then I'm here." He resumed in that same even cadence, naming stars, old routes, weather signs, the shape of the moon as it would look when clouds cleared at dawn. Her breathing slowly matched the rhythm of his words. At some point she curled on her side, cheek against the pillow, and let the sound of him anchor her where panic had wanted to pull her under. When sleep took her again, it was dreamless. By afternoon, the keep was all knives and whispers. Word of the boundary kneeling had outrun the sleet. Servants bowed too low or not at all. Warriors looked at her with fascination, suspicion, hunger for gossip. Genevieve walked beside Lucian through a corridor of carved stone wolves toward the council chamber, wrists freshly bandaged and chin high enough to be mistaken for unbothered. The chamber itself was an amphitheater of timber and slate. Map table at center, banners ringed overhead. 3 Silvermane elders waited before the hearth, Maelor Greybeard, thin-faced Vera, and iron-backed Orin. None of them bowed to her. Vera spoke first. "Before strategy, we address contamination risk." Genevieve stilled. Maelor folded his hands. "With respect, Your Majesty, the Dark Hollow woman arrives in chains on treaty night and declares mate bond under duress. We cannot verify intent. She should be confined in the lower cellars until truth scent and oath rites are complete." "Cellars," Orin added, glancing at Genevieve as if she were a weapon laid on the wrong table, "are safer for everyone." Lucian sat in the high chair but did not lean back. "No." Maelor's jaw tightened. "You are compromised, my king. That is precisely why council exists." "I said no." Vera's voice sharpened. "Then hear this plainly. If she is spy-marked and you refuse protocol, Silvermane law permits temporary regency seizure for the Pack's protection." The room shifted. Several captains reached for hilts. Genevieve felt old reflexes urge her to stand smaller, quieter, survivable. Expendable echoed in her skull. Lucian moved before anyone else breathed. His sword left the sheath in a single bright line and slammed point first through the center of the council table, burying 6 inches into old oak with a crack like thunder. Maps jumped, inkpots tipped, silence detonated. He rose, both hands flat on the table edge, eyes gone molten gold. "Any wolf," he said, each word carved and lethal. "Who suggests a caging my mate may challenge me now for alpha rule." No one moved. He ripped the blade free and pointed it at the floor beside his own dais. "Bring another chair." A page hesitated. Lucian didn't look away from the elders. "Now." The page ran. Within moments, a second carved seat, smaller but high-backed, was dragged to stand level with Lucian's. He sheathed his sword, turned to Genevieve, and offered his hand in full view of every elder in the room. "Moon's witness," he said. "Sit." Her pulse kicked. Every stare in the chamber landed on her like weight. She took his hand anyway and let him guide her up the 2 steps to the raised seat. Equal height, equal sightline. Not behind him, not below. Council resumed with brittle formality and barely concealed fury, but something fundamental had shifted. Genevieve watched the elders recalculate in real time and understood, with a slow, unsettling clarity, that Lucian had just spent political blood for her without asking what she could repay. By dusk, she was less certain where enemy ended. The corridor outside the map archives smelled of ink, cold stone, and impending snow. Genevieve walked with one Silvermane guard at her shoulder and another 3 paces behind, carrying copied border reports she'd demanded to see herself. If Corvus was staging raids, patterns would show in timing, routes, supply theft. She needed facts before feelings made her stupid. The first arrow struck the wall ahead with a hard thunk. "Down!" the front guard shouted, reaching for her. Second arrow took him through the throat. He collapsed at Genevieve's feet, blood spraying the reports from her hands. She spun, shifting half an inch, claws punching through fingertips, just as 2 figures in dark hollow cloaks burst from the stairwell, masks painted with her birth pack's crescent mark. Assassins. A third silhouette appeared on the gallery above, bow drawn, black-fletched shaft aimed straight at her chest. Genevieve lunged sideways. A gray blur slammed into her from the right and knocked her clear. Lucian. He had come at a dead run from the opposite hall, shifting mid-stride. Bones snapped and lengthened in a blur of fur and muscle before her eyes, the arrow meant for her buried deep in his shoulder. Another punched into his flank before he fully completed the change. Poison scent hit the air, bitter and metallic. Lucian's wolf hit the first attacker with enough force to crack stone. Teeth closed on a masked throat. He flung the body into the wall, spun, and launched for the archer on the gallery. The archer loosed at point-blank range. The shaft grazed Lucian's neck, carving a bloody line over old scar tissue. He didn't slow. They went over the rail together in a tangle of claws and steel. Genevieve was already moving. She ripped the fallen guard's short blade free, ducked under a slash from the second assassin, and drove her elbow into his jaw. He reeled. She kicked his knee sideways, heard a pop, then slashed across his forearm to disarm. The knife clattered. He reached for a hidden vial at his belt. "Don't," she warned. He grinned through blood. "Traitor!" She punched him in the throat, hard. He dropped, choking. Across the hall, Lucian tore through the last attacker, then staggered as the poison worked fast. His wolf form blurred, collapsed back toward human, one knee smashing into the stones. He braced on one hand, breathing ragged, blood darkening his shirt where arrows jutted. "Lucian!" Genevieve was beside him before she realized she'd moved. He tried to rise, failed, and sank to both knees directly in front of her, head bowed by sheer loss of strength. Blood dripped from his fingertips onto her boots. "Stay back," he rasped. Could be more. Shut up, she snapped, hands already on his face, forcing him to focus on her. Look at me. His eyes found hers, gold flickering in and out. She snapped at the surviving guard, voice cracking like command. Healer! Antidote kit, now! The guard bolted. Genevieve gripped the shaft in Lucian's shoulder, assessed angle, then stopped. These are barbed. He gave a weak, humorless huff. You always this comforting? Only with kings I haven't decided to forgive. A ghost of a smile touched his bloodless mouth. She pressed her forehead to his for one brief, fierce second, letting the bond thread steady into something usable instead of overwhelming. Do not die on me, she whispered, so low only he could hear. I am not done being angry. Lucian's hand, slick with his own blood, closed around her wrist, not to restrain, just to hold. Good, he breathed. Stay angry. Footsteps thundered. Healers arrived with stretchers, herbs, curses. As they took his weight, Genevieve rose and turned toward the corridor, where dark hollow-marked bodies lay cooling on Silvermane stone. Corvus had reached into this keep, into her life, into him. When she looked back, Lucian was watching her through pain haze, still tracking her like a compass point. For the first time since chains closed around her wrists, Genevieve did not pull away from that gaze. She stepped with the stretcher as they carried him, shoulder nearly brushing his, and did not pretend anymore that this bond was a story she could outstare. She was still afraid, still furious, still full of knives. But when his fingers found hers again on the edge of consciousness, she let them stay. She walked beside the stretcher all the way to the healer's wing, matching each jolt of Lucian's breathing with a clench of her jaw. The corridors blurred into torchlight and shouted orders. Doors flew open ahead of them. The infirmary smelled of boiled willow bark, iron, and wet fur. Healers stripped his torn shirt, and Genevieve got her first clean look at the damage. One arrow sunk deep in the shoulder meat, one in the flank, both black-fletched, both weeping around the shaft with a thin, oily sheen that stung her nose. Moonbane mix, she said, before she could stop herself. 3 healers looked up at once. You know it, the lead healer demanded. Genevieve nodded, already scrubbing blood from her hands in a basin. Dark Hollow hunters use a weaker variant on rogue bears. This concentration is for wolves. It slows clotting and fouls shifting. Lucian, half on his side on the treatment table, gave a rasp of a laugh that turned into a cough. Good, he muttered. Glad to know they came prepared. Don't talk, she snapped. His eyes, heavy-lidded with pain, still found hers. Yes, Genevieve. The title landed between them, raw and private amid the chaos. Hold him! The healer barked. 2 assistants pinned Lucian's shoulders. Genevieve moved to the head of the table without being asked, and braced his forearm. His fingers locked hard around her wrist as the first arrow came out. He didn't cry out. The tendons in his neck stood out like cables, and the old crescent scar over his throat flushed angry red, pulsing in time with the bond until her own skin burned in the same place. By the second extraction, sweat ran cold down her back. Antidote, she said. Add moonroot and bitter fennel. Not foxglove. Moonbane reacts. The lead healer hesitated only a second before nodding. Do it. Behind her, boots hammered in the hallway. Captain Rourke, square-jawed, scar over one brow, appeared in the doorway with 2 guards hauling a bound assassin between them. The man had lost his mask. His face was young, hard, and very much alive. Rourke's mouth was grim. Found him choking in the lower stairs. Tried to bite through a poison capsule. We broke 2 teeth first. Genevieve turned. The prisoner saw her and spat blood on the stones. Traitor bitch, he snarled. Should have put the second shaft through your eye. Rourke backhanded him quiet, then looked to Lucian for instruction. Lucian's breathing was ragged, but his voice still cut. Interrogate. The prisoner laughed wetly. Interrogate what? You already know your mate called us in. Every head in the infirmary turned to Genevieve. She held the assassin's gaze and walked straight to him until they were almost nose to nose. "Who gave you the corridor map?" He smirked, split lip gleaming. "A dark hollow hand." "Name?" "No." She caught his broken little finger and bent. He screamed before he could stop himself. "Name." His eyes watered with rage. "Corvus," he gasped. "Corvus Bloodmoon. Happy?" Silence dropped like stone. Rourke swore softly. One healer made a warding sign against bad moon. Genevieve did not let go. "Orders?" "Keep the border hot, hit both sides, make the king look rabid." He sucked air through his teeth. "And if the female bonded true?" He laughed again, this time shaky. "Sever them." The word hit her like a thrown blade. Lucian went still on the table. Genevieve released the finger and grabbed the assassin's jaw. "How?" The young man's bravado faltered for the first time. "Blood right," he whispered. "Old one. He stole it from your dead matriarch's vault. Said Silvermane alphas go mad when the bond tears. Said we only had to start the cut, and your king would finish destroying himself." Her stomach dropped. Grandmother's vault. A blood right no one living was supposed to know. Corvus hadn't just staged assassinations. He was reaching for inherited magic designed to break dynasties. Rourke dragged the prisoner back as he kicked and cursed. "Get him to the black cells," the captain said. "No windows. No teeth left to bite through anything." When they were gone, the room felt colder. Genevieve turned back to the table. Lucian's eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, but she could feel his wolf pacing under his skin through the bond, agitated and violent. "You knew," she said quietly, "about the prophecy." His jaw tightened. "I knew of stories." "Not stories, right instructions." Her voice dropped. "He has them." Lucian finally looked at her. Pain made him pale, but there was iron in his gaze. "Then we stop him before moonrise." The lead healer slammed a pestle down. "You stop nothing tonight. You nearly bled out on my floor, Your Majesty." Lucian tried to sit. Genevieve put a hand flat on his chest and pushed him back before he got an inch. "Listen to her," she said. He blinked once at her hand, then, miracle, stayed down. Outside, alarm bells started at the western wall. Then, seconds later, from the east, 2 bells, 2 borders. Same night. Corvus had started moving the board. Reports came in drenched, breathless, and contradictory. By the time Lucian was stitched, dosed, and furious in a chair instead of a bed, the war room map was littered with fresh pins. A grain convoy burned in southern Silvermane fields by wolves wearing Dark Hollow braid. A Dark Hollow watchpost slaughtered by raiders carrying Silvermane axes. 3 neutral traders hanged at the ford with both pack crests carved into their chests. Genevieve stood at the table, fingers braced on wood gone tacky from spilled ink. Rourke paced and read from wet dispatches while elders argued over him. "It's retaliation," Vera snapped. "Dark Hollow strikes because we harbored her." Maelor rounded on Genevieve. "What signal did you send?" She met his stare without blinking. "If I were signaling Corvus, your king would already be dead." "That can still be arranged," Orin muttered. Lucian, one arm in a fresh bandage sling, did not raise his voice. "Say that again." Orin looked away first. Another runner burst in, cloak torn. "Message from Dark Hollow Regency," he panted, handing over a sealed scroll. Rourke broke it, scanned, and swore. "Read it," Lucian said. Rourke did. "To the unstable king who crossed sacred line and stole lawful tribute, return Genevieve Darkhollow in chains before next moon, or regard all border blood as on your claws. Signed Corvus Bloodmoon, acting regent." Vera threw up her hands. "There, open threat. He wants her back, and he'll keep killing until emergency rule cements," Genevieve cut in. "That's the point. Continuous crisis keeps him untouchable at home." She stabbed a finger at the map. "Look at timing. Every strike hits just far enough from command posts to guarantee panic, not decisive loss. He's curating fear. Rourke grunted reluctant agreement. Pattern tracks. Lucian watched her with that unnerving stillness he got when locking onto prey or truth. And the severing right? She swallowed. If he can break a mated alpha pair publicly, he gets more than war. He gets myth on his side. See, he'll say, Silvermane kings are monsters when bonded. Keep me in power or that madness crosses the line. No one spoke for a beat. Then Maelor said, even if true, her presence accelerates it. Every attack now points to this bond. Genevieve felt the room close in. Distrust from one side, blood claim from the other, Corvus tightening both nooses at once. Attraction was one problem. Politics was another. This was calculus with bodies. Lucian rose despite the healer's oathful protest. He moved slower than usual, poison still in him, but the room shifted around his gravity anyway. She stays, he said. Vera's expression hardened. Then we fortify inner keep and restrict her movement. No cages, Lucian replied. A compromise, Your Majesty, not a cage. Genevieve spoke before he could. Fine. Every head turned. She kept her voice level. Post your guards. Track me, scent me, audit my meals if it helps you sleep. But while you do, you'll give me full access to raid logs from both sides and the old Moonlore archives. Maelor frowned. Why would we? Because I'm the one he grew up with, she said. I know how Corvus lies. And if he stole from my grandmother's vault, I might be the only person in this room who can recognize what right components he'll need next. Lucian held her gaze, then nodded once. Granted. Vera looked as if she'd swallowed nettles. If she runs? She won't, Lucian said. The certainty in his tone made Genevieve's stomach twist. She wasn't sure if she wanted to earn it or break it before he could be disappointed. As the council fractured into task orders, she felt Lucian's hand brush the small of her back. A guiding touch. Nothing more. Gone in a heartbeat. Her skin lit anyway. Fear and want were becoming impossible to separate. Night deepened. Snow began for real. Hours later, with the keep quieter and the alarms temporarily stilled, Genevieve found Lucian on the western battlement where wind clawed over the stone and turned breath to ghosts. He stood alone, cloak open, one hand on the parapet, looking toward the dark seam of the border. You're not supposed to be out of bed, she said. He didn't turn. You're not supposed to be unattended. Your guards are 3 paces behind that arch pretending not to listen. A rough sound that might have been amusement left him. Fair. She came to stand beside him. For a while they said nothing. Below, the pines shifted black on black. Above, clouds shredded enough to reveal stars, faint, then clearer. The winter crown, she said softly, surprising herself. Now he looked at her. You remembered. You talked all night. I talk when I'm anxious. She glanced at him sidelong. You were anxious? Terrified. No hesitation, no pride armor. You were screaming behind a locked door and I couldn't fix it. The honesty hit harder than any grand declaration. Genevieve wrapped her fingers around cold stone to keep them from shaking. I don't scream much. I noticed. Wynne lifted a strand of her hair and slapped it against his shoulder. Neither moved away. After a moment, she said, Corvus came to my cell before the handover, gave me a list of names. Her voice thinned despite her control. My brothers, my niece. He said if I made trouble, he'd start with them. Lucian's hand tightened on the parapet until old mortar crumbled. Where are they now? Dark Hollow inner dens. Supposedly under Regency protection. She laughed once, bitter. Protection by the man threatening to gut them. We can extract them. You can't just invade my home and steal children. I can, if the alternative is murder. She turned fully toward him. And that's how this never ends. Your rescue becomes his proof of Silvermane aggression. More blood. More emergency decrees. Lucian held her stare. Then we do it quieter. Something in her chest gave, just a little, a wallstone sliding loose. She reached up before she overthought it and touched the crescent scar at his throat with 2 careful fingers. He went absolutely still. "This," she said, voice barely above the wind. "Was this from a severing attempt?" He closed his eyes for 1 second. "My father's reign. Rogue priest tried to cut his bond from my mother to trigger challenge chaos. I got between them." A humorless half smile. "I was 16 and very stupid. Or very brave. Sometimes the same thing." She let her hand fall. "Does the prophecy scare you?" "Yes." He looked at her directly, stripped of titles, just a man in pain and weather. "Not because I think I'll go mad, because I think I could be made to hurt you and know exactly what I'm doing." The confession hollowed her out. Genevieve took a breath that burned. "I'm scared too." "Of me?" "Of needing you." His expression changed, fierce, aching, almost reverent. He lifted his good hand, paused inches from her face. "May I?" The old question. Permission, again. She nodded. His knuckles brushed her cheek, barely there, calloused and warm despite the cold. The bond flared molten under her skin, but this time it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a door opening onto unfamiliar ground. She leaned into his hand before pride could stop her. They stayed like that under the stars he had once spoken through a door. Close enough to kiss, too honest to rush it. When she finally stepped back, she did not rebuild all the walls she'd lowered. Then the horn sounded from below. 3 rapid blasts, distress signal from Gatehouse. Both of them moved at once. Chaos met them in the lower hall. A courier had arrived from the neutral market road with no horse, no cloak, and a knife wound stitched badly across his own ribs. He was barely upright between 2 guards, clutching a leather tube sealed in dark red wax stamped with the blood moon crest. For Lady Genevieve," he wheezed. Rourke grabbed for the tube. The courier jerked away with surprising strength. Her hand, only hers, said children scream first if Wrong Wolf opens it. Genevieve's blood turned to ice. Lucian stepped in front of her. "Search him." "Already did," Rourke said. "No blades left, no poison capsule." The courier looked at Genevieve with wild, exhausted eyes. "Boundary stones," he whispered. "Old ones by the creek. He made me watch." His voice broke. "He has a dagger made of bone. Cut a man's throat and it didn't heal." Silence slammed through the hall. Lucian's wolf surged so hard through the bond Genevieve swayed with it. "Give it to me," she told the courier. He placed the tube in her hand and collapsed. Healers rushed him. Around them, guards formed a hard ring without being told. Snow blew through the half-open gate and died on warm stone. The wax seal cracked under Genevieve's thumb. Inside was a strip of parchment and a child's braid tie she recognized. Blue wool, one corner singed from her niece's hair. Her vision tunneled. Lucian's voice came from very far away. "What does it say?" She made herself read aloud, each word a nail. "Come alone to the old boundary stones." Her voice shook, then hardened. "Or I slaughter every child in your birth den first." A beat. Then another line, scrawled beneath in Corvus's hand. "Bring your mate, and I use grandmother's blade on him before you watch." Lucian reached for her. "No." Genevieve folded the parchment once, very neatly, and met his eyes. In the bond she felt his refusal, his fear, his fury, felt her own answering like flint. Outside, beyond walls and snow and law, the boundary stones waited. And somewhere in the dark, Corvus was already sharpening the right. And somewhere in the dark, Corvus was already sharpening the right. Lucian's refusal hit the bond like a slammed door. "No," he said again, louder this time, to the whole hall. Absolutely not. Genevieve folded Corvus's message and slid it into her sleeve. If I don't go, he kills them. If you go alone, he kills you. He might do that anyway. Rourke stepped closer, face set. My lady, we can muster a strike unit in 10. No strike unit. Genevieve looked at Lucian, not the captain. That message wasn't a bluff. Corvus wrote this for me. He expects your temper, your army, your need to protect. If he sees either pack in force, he starts with children's throats. Lucian's jaw flexed. Then we move unseen. You're too visible to be unseen, Alpha King. And you are my mate. The words weren't possessive this time. They were terrified. Genevieve took one step toward him until only breath sat between them. Then trust me like one. His eyes flashed gold. Trusting you isn't the problem. Losing you is. Something in her expression must have shifted, because he went still in that dangerous way that meant he was listening despite himself. Give me 15 minutes in the archive vault, she said quietly. Then I'll go. Genevieve. 15. Her voice sharpened. You asked me in chains if someone forced me to speak the claim. No one did. This choice is mine too. Silence stretched. Wind pushed snow through the gate in white ribbons. Finally, Lucian ground out, You are not going unguarded. Not visibly. Rourke looked between them. Hidden perimeter? Genevieve nodded once. Far enough Corvus can't sense Silvermane's steel. Close enough to move when the signal hits. What signal? Lucian asked. She held up her hands. Wolfsbane ash under my nails. He'll be running a circle if he means to sever us. Wolfsbane blinds bloodfire for 2 breaths if thrown right. When his right flares green, I break it. That's your moment. Lucian stared at her palms, then at her face. How do you know this? Because grandmother taught me forbidden things while Corvus learned speeches. His breath left him rough. If this fails, it won't. That wasn't what I asked. Genevieve cupped his face in both hands, heedless of the blood and ash still on her skin. If this fails, she said, eyes locked to his. You do not break. You hear me? You do not give him his prophecy. The bond throbbed once, hard as a heartbeat under a wound. He covered her wrists with his hands, gentle around fresh bandages. Come back to me. Come when I call. The old boundary stones rose from the creek bank like teeth under moonlight, each one etched with sigils older than either pack's name. Snow had crusted in the grooves. Wind hissed through dead grass and cedar. Genevieve arrived alone, cloak hooded, empty sword belt visible by design. Corvus waited inside a ring of black candles hammered into frozen ground. 8 rogues stood at his back, faces painted with mixed pack marks, half Darkhollow ash, half Silvermane silver, his manufactured war made flesh. At Corvus's feet lay 3 bundled shapes on their knees, heads hooded, wrists bound, child-sized. Her heart tried to claw out of her chest. You came, Corvus said, smiling. I told them you would. Family is such an efficient leash. Genevieve stopped just outside the candle ring. Let them go. Soon. He spread his hands. First, kneel. She laughed once, flat and sharp. You used to hide under tables when grandmother called council. His smile thinned. And you used to think bravery was enough to matter. While she spoke, her boot heel scraped lightly against the nearest standing stone. Beneath cloak and shadow, her fingers found the moon chisel tucked inside her sleeve. 3 strokes. Quiet. Fast. New sigil cut over old line. Redirect. Corvus took a step closer. Do you know what they called you the night you were born? The extra heir. Spare blood. Even your mother said. My mother said. Genevieve cut in, carving the second sigil with a turn of her wrist against another stone, that wolves who fear women call prophecy madness. His eyes flashed. still sentimental. He drew the dagger. Moonlight caught pale white along its blade, not ivory, not steel. Bone, old as graves. Her grandmother's crest had been carved into the hilt and then scratched out by a furious hand. The rogues shifted. One kicked the nearest hooded captive in the back. A muffled cry, too deep to be a child. Decoy. Rage and relief slammed through her together so hard she swayed. He didn't have them here. He'd gambled on her panic. Corvus noticed the flicker in her face and mistook it. Good, he murmured. Feel that? Fear makes blood obedient. He slashed the bone dagger across his own palm and flung blood into the candle ring. Flame hissed green. The world lurched. Pain knifed through Genevieve's sternum, sudden and unbearable, as if invisible claws had hooked the bond thread and started sawing. Her wolf screamed inside her skin. Somewhere beyond trees and dark and distance, Lucian roared, a raw animal sound strangled halfway into silence. Corvus began to chant in old tongue, each word a nail driven through marrow. Genevieve dropped to one knee, not in submission, but because her legs buckled. Frost crawled up her boots. The sigils she had carved a breath ago began to glow pale blue under snow. Don't fight it, Corvus said over the chant. Let it tear. Let him go feral. Let both packs see what your choice costs. The bond stretched, thinned, burned. Genevieve bared her teeth. Choice, she rasped, and drove her own claw into the inside of her wrist. Blood welled hot and black-red in moonlight. She slapped that blood across her throat where Lucian's scar answered through the link. Felt. Impossibly. His skin flare under her palm, though he was not touching her. The thread snapped taut, not broken, but anchored. Blood to scar, will to will. In the pines, a crashing surge of movement, wolves, men. Lucian's scent hit the clearing, frost and iron and fury. Corvus snarled and raised the dagger higher, forcing more power into the right. Now, Genevieve whispered. She flung both hands forward. Wolfsbane ash burst from her palms in a gray cloud over the green fire. Candles sputtered. The ritual circle flashed white, then went blind and dark. Corvus cursed, stumbling as his own chant rebounded into static. The hidden sigils on the standing stones lit all at once. Blue lines racing around the boundary like lightning in rock, redirecting the torn bond current back through his circle. Rogues shouted. Two shifted mid-panic, half-formed and screaming. Lucian hit the edge of the clearing like a storm given teeth, Rourke and Silvermane flankers behind him. Dark Hollow scouts poured from the opposite tree line seconds later. Drawn by the right flare, led by Genevieve's old training captain, face ashen when he saw Corvus with the bone blade. Chaos detonated, steel rang, wolves crashed into men. Someone shouted, "Regent's gone blood mad!" Another yelled, "Protect the lady!" And no one agreed who that meant. Corvus ripped free of the failing circle and lunged straight for Genevieve with the bone dagger, eyes wild. "Born to be traded!" he screamed. "Not crowned!" Lucian sprinted for her, but a rogue in full shift slammed into him from the side. They rolled, snarling and snapping into the stones. He tore the attacker's throat out with one-handed brutality and rose, already moving. But Corvus was faster for one desperate second. The dagger slashed across Genevieve's shoulder. Pain exploded white-hot. Her left arm went numb from collarbone to fingertips. She didn't fall. Corvus came in for the kill, blade reversing toward her heart. Genevieve caught his wrist with her good hand. Bone and tendon ground under her grip. He was stronger than memory, fueled by panic and right fire. She shifted partially, claws punching through skin, jaw lengthening, eyes flooding gold, and twisted with her whole body. Something cracked. Corvus screamed as his wrist broke. The bone dagger dropped, spinning once on the snow. Genevieve drove her forehead into his face. Cartilage crunched. He reeled back, choking blood. She kicked the dagger across the clearing. It slid to Lucian's boots. Lucian snatched Corvus by the throat and slammed him against a standing stone hard enough to split lichen. His claws half extended, fangs bared, every line of him poised to kill. "Do it!" Corvus gargled, blood on his teeth. "Give them their monster king!" Lucian's arm shook with restraint. He did not strike. Genevieve crossed the distance, shoulder bleeding, breath ragged, and picked up the bone dagger herself. Corvus looked from blade to her face and laughed weakly. There she is, finally useful. She stood before him and spoke so only he and Lucian could hear at first. "You sold me as tribute because you feared what I'd become." Then she turned, raising her voice for both packs in the clearing, for every elder and captain and witness drawn by blood and prophecy. "You forged war to keep your regency. You staged raids on your own people. You threatened children to command obedience. You called me expendable because you could not control me." Corvus spat blood. "You were always meant to kneel." Genevieve stepped into the center of his ruined ritual circle and plunged the dagger point first into the moon sigil she had carved to redirect. Power snapped. Blue-white fire shot up the blade, raced through the circle, and slammed back into Corvus through the blood he'd fed it. He arched in Lucian's grip, screaming as light burned beneath his skin like molten veins. The smell was ash, and old bone, and burned lies. Genevieve held his gaze as he convulsed. "No," she said, voice steady as stone. "I was meant to choose." Corvus's scream broke into a choking laugh, then into nothing. His body fissured along the glowing lines of the right and collapsed inward, ash spilling between Lucian's fingers to the snow. Silence fell in hard, stunned layers. Where Corvus had stood, only the blackened hilt crest remained, cracked clean in two. For a long breath, Genevieve just stood there, swaying, blood soaking her cloak from shoulder to wrist. Then the shock hit. Knees buckled. Lucian caught her before she struck stone, gathering her in with a sound that was almost a growl and almost a prayer. "Easy. Easy, I have you." Rourke's voice barked orders somewhere behind them. "Bind survivors, secure the captives, send riders to Dark Hollow inner dens, verify the children." Dark Hollow's training captain dropped to one knee in front of Genevieve and bowed his head without speaking, shame written in every line of him. She barely saw any of it. Her world had narrowed to Lucian's hands, Lucian's breath, Lucian's eyes scanning her wound with barely leashed panic. "Healers!" he snapped. Genevieve grabbed his collar with her good hand and hauled him down until his forehead touched hers. "Wait." His breathing stuttered. "You're bleeding." "I know." Her voice shook. "Listen to me." Around them, wolves from both packs watched in absolute silence, as if the whole border held its breath again. Genevieve slid her fingers to the side of her neck, to the junction of throat and shoulder where pulse beat hardest. She tipped her chin, exposing the line cleanly. Lucian froze. This was not frenzy, not accident, not victory claims stolen in chaos. It was offering, witnessed, chosen. "May I mark you?" he asked, voice rough enough to break stone. "Yes," she whispered, louder so all could hear. "I choose this." His eyes burned gold. "Mine." "Yours," she answered. "Mate." His hands framed her jaw, careful despite the tremor in them. He bared his fangs and pressed one last warning kiss to her throat, ask and answer in a single breath, then bit. Pain lanced sharp and bright, a clean puncture that flared instantly into heat. It rushed through her like liquid fire, not consuming but awakening. Spine arching, wolf surging, every nerve singing at once. The bond that had been thread became river. She felt him in her blood, in her lungs, in the oldest marrow places words never reached. A sound tore from her, half gasp, half howl. Lucian held the bite for 2 heartbeats. 3. then released and licked the wound closed with reverent precision, sealing the mark. Warmth pooled under her skin, then spread outward in golden waves. The agony in her shoulder dulled to manageable throb. The cold vanished. His forehead dropped to hers, shaking. Yours, he breathed. Always yours. Genevieve's wolf rose, wild and certain. She cupped his jaw, thumb brushing blood from his lip. Your turn. His eyes widened slightly. Genevieve, you're hurt. So are you. She pushed at his chest until he sat back on his heels in the snow. With deliberate fingers, she tore open the front of his shirt where old scar tissue crossed over his heart. A pale mark from some long ago near kill. She looked at him once, giving him the chance to refuse. May I mark you? His answer was immediate, raw. Yes. Mine. Yours, she said again, and lowered her mouth to his chest. Her fangs pierced skin over the scar. He jerked on a harsh inhale, hands gripping her waist hard enough to bruise, then softened, palms spreading as the bond surged back in the opposite direction, his pulse flooding her, his fear unspooling, fierce devotion and savage relief pouring through the newly sealed channel. Pleasure hit like a second wave under the pain, molten and dizzying. Their wolves threw back their heads and howled in unison, the sound rolling over stone and snow and both packs alike. When she released, blood welled bright. She sealed his mark with her tongue and felt his shudder all the way down to his fingertips. Mate, he whispered against her mouth. Mate, she answered. He pulled her into him, careful of her shoulder and still somehow all-encompassing, arms locked around her as if the world might still try to take her. She curled into the hold with equal ferocity, breathing him in. Frost, cedar, iron. And now the unmistakable scent of home threaded through both of them. Forehead to forehead, lips almost touching, they spoke the vow together, exactly the same words at exactly the same time. No chains, no crowns, only chosen. Around them, first one wolf, then another dropped to a knee, not to Lucian alone, not to bloodline, but to the bond witnessed and returned. Rourke knelt. Dark Hollow's training captain followed. Even Maelor and Vera arrived breathless at the clearing's edge with late council guards, bowed their heads when they saw the twin marks and the ash where Corvus had stood. The old order had burned with him. Dawn came pale and clean over the border 3 days later, and this time both packs crossed the line in daylight. Not for war, for signatures. The standing stones had been scrubbed of blood. New moon sigils, cut by Genevieve's own hand, gleamed silver blue in the morning light. A long table stood between them, with 2 copies of a new charter, weighted by river stones instead of weapons. Rourke called the assembly to order. By witness of Dark Hollow and Silvermane, we convene under shared moon law. Genevieve stood at the table in a dark cloak clasped with no single pack crest, a new sigil, half crescent, half wolf fang, ringed by 7 stars. Lucian stood beside her, not before, not behind. His arm was still bandaged from the arrows. His throat mark and hers were visible by choice. Across from them, Dark Hollow elders had come without Corvus's standard. Acting command had passed to an interim council led by Den Mother Ilara, gray-haired and iron-eyed, who had publicly opened the Regency records at dawn and found Corvus's payments to rogue cells on both sides. She carried those ledgers now, set them down for all to see, and spoke in a voice that carried to the outer ranks. Corvus Bloodmoon is dead by consequence of his own blood right, she said. His co-conspirators are named and under arrest in Dark Hollow cells. Let witness stand, the war was fed, not fated. A murmur rippled through both crowds. Then 3 children were led forward from the Dark Hollow contingent, Genevieve's brothers, mud-splashed and wide-eyed, and her niece with the blue braid tie replaced by a fresh one. Genevieve went still for half a heartbeat, then moved. She knelt as they ran into her, careful of her healing shoulder and careless of everything else. You came, the youngest brother whispered into her cloak. Always, she said, voice breaking. Lucian crouched beside them, deliberately lowering himself to child height. You're safe here, he said. All of you. The niece studied his scarred face, then touched the mark at Genevieve's neck with solemn fingers. Does it hurt? Genevieve smiled through sudden tears. It did. Then it didn't. When the children were escorted back to Ilara's side, Genevieve rose and took the charter pen. She read the first clause aloud. No wolf shall be traded as tribute, hostage, or collateral under any law recognized by Darkhollow, Silvermane, or Border Authority. Second clause. The contested borderlands are dissolved as war ground and rechartered as neutral territory under Moon Regency, open to mixed pack settlement, shared market, and joint tribunal. Third. Alpha Authority is limited by Covenant Council representation from both packs and neutral dens. She signed, Genevieve Darkhollow, Moon Regent of the Borderlands. Lucian signed next, Lucian Silvermane, Alpha King, by chosen bond and shared law. Then, before anyone could turn it into ceremony only, he stepped forward and spoke without script. Hear me, he said, voice carrying like winter thunder. I was raised to rule over. I reject it. Before moon, blood, and witness, I swear to rule beside my mate, not above her. Any decree bearing my seal against this charter is void unless countersigned by Moon Regent Genevieve. Silence. Then a low, building roar from Silvermane ranks. Darkhollow answered a beat later, less certain, then stronger as Ilara lifted her hand in assent. Mailer came forward first among the old dissenters. He bowed to Genevieve, stiff but genuine. I spoke for your confinement, he said. I was wrong. Vera followed, lips thin. I mistrusted you. I still mistrust easy peace. She inclined her head anyway. But I will serve hard peace under law. Orin knelt, fist to heart. No more sellers. Genevieve accepted each without triumph, then build with us. By noon, the first mixed work crews were already marking foundation lines near the creek. Shared granary, healer outpost, market shelter, where neither crest would fly higher than the other. Rourke oversaw patrol routes rewritten in 2 inks. Darkhollow's training captain volunteered his unit for child escort duty until every threatened den was accounted for. At the edge of the new boundary square, Genevieve and Lucian stood for a moment apart from the noise, watching wolves who had been enemies last week argue over lumber measurements like ordinary neighbors. Lucian brushed his knuckles over her mark. Moon Regent, he murmured, tasting the title. She touched the healed bite over his heart through his shirt. Alpha King. He leaned in, nose to hers, eyes warm with tired wonder. Mine. She smiled. Yours. Mate. Mate. Behind them, hammers rang. Children laughed near the creek. Above the standing stones, the winter crown burned faint in daylight. 7 patient stars waiting for night. This time, when Genevieve crossed the territory line, she did not cross in chains. She crossed on her own feet, with her chosen at her side, into a future they had built where betrayal had fewer shadows and choice was law.